Lawyers representing FTX detailed the, quote, abrupt and difficult, end quote, collapse of the crypto exchange during the company's first bankruptcy hearing today in Delaware. Joining us now to discuss is Eric Snyder. He's partner at the law firm Wilk, Auslander, and head of the firm's bankruptcy and restructuring department. No one knows better than he does. Eric, welcome to All About Bitcoin.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So, what was your big takeaway from today's hearing?
Well, I think it's become clear that when Bankman first said there was $8 billion that was owed or missing, and they only have about $500 million that's unrestricted in the debtor in possession bank accounts, that's really a return of less than 10% for all of the creditors. The lawyers, financial advisors, and prospective professionals that are going to get paid will make that money even lower. And unlike Madoff, where you could trace the money through bank accounts, wires, and the like, it's very difficult, as you know, through Bitcoin, through cryptocurrency, to find that money. So when you can trace the money and ask the court to help you normally, here, if the money is in a wallet and is transferred from that wallet into another cryptocurrency, it's going to be very difficult to find that money. And I think that was made clear at the hearing today. It was a very somber and gloom and doom projection that the $500 million, it may be very difficult to grow that money. As you pointed out, the $3 billion is only for the top 50 or 60. There are billions of dollars of other creditors that are unnamed. So we have no idea what the denominator, the actual claims look like.
Yeah, it's something like 1 million creditors they expect, account holders, et cetera, who may have suffered under this. James Bromley of Sullivan Cromwell, he told the court that the FTX continues to suffer from cyber attacks since the hack drained hundreds of millions of dollars in crypto the night that FTX declared bankruptcy. And so a substantial amount, that's the quote, of crypto appears to have been stolen. So how liable are all these FTX executives when it comes to recovering those stolen funds? Are they on the hook for any of it, even if they might not have been involved? Again, that's also a question.
So that's a good question. So for the pre-bankruptcy transfers, obviously if there was fraud, misrepresentations, or theft or conversion that can be traced directly to the officers, directors, or shareholders, they're on the hook for that. Everything happened after they left, and they all left after November 11th. They're not as directly liable, but they are liable for setting up these inherently poor systems. They have duties to the shareholders, they have duties to the creditors, and if their lack of oversight led to these hacks, then they would be on the hook for not anything they specifically did after the November 11th bankruptcy, but things that happened as a result of their potential negligent or mismanagement.
Again, that's even assuming that this wasn't an inside job, and we still don't know exactly who did this. So I just want to be clear that, again, who knows what they'll really be on the hook for. It could be even more. So the liquidators appointed by the court overseeing the collapse of FTX, of the assets in the Bahamas, they agreed to transfer the case to New York, that was filed in New York, to Delaware. That's where the company had filed for bankruptcy protection. How significant is this?
Well, it's not particularly significant, but I'd be interested in knowing, and the company was very clear that they were very surprised and somewhat upset that even after the bankruptcy filing, the liquidators in Bahamas filed the bankruptcy in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan instead of in Delaware, where all the cases were pending. And they made it clear that the liquidators in Bahamas knew that the filings had happened in Delaware, and they still filed it in Manhattan. So all's okay now. All's okay now. It was transferred to Delaware, but it's completely unclear why they would not file in Delaware where the rest of the bankruptcies were filing.
Does that give you a sense of just how chaotic this whole bankruptcy has become? I mean, a month ago, I think very few people would have expected this to have happened. So do you think that this just kind of shows just how poorly coordinated it all has been?
Well, the professionals that are in there now, what normally happens is when you file for bankruptcy, especially a big one, an 11-figure one like this one, you have weeks in advance to prepare for it usually. You line up financing, you have your lawyers preparing the documents. They have something called day one and day two hearings to put all the processes and mechanisms into place. Here, everything basically happened the night of November 10th. They filed November 11th. So what became first day and second day hearings are now first week and second week hearings, and they're only now getting their bearings. And that goes into your question about the post-bankruptcy hacks. You never see that in bankruptcy because you had a chief restructuring officer and financial advisors in place, and they still took about $500 million supposedly the weekend after the November 11th filing. So I have very little faith that the money's going to be recovered, and that the money they have now, I just hope, isn't eaten up by professional fees chasing something they can't find.
Now, speaking of hundreds of millions of dollars that might have been blown away, FTX, it seems that they spent about $300 million in real estate in the Bahamas. Look, I love real estate. I think it's a fantastic investment for the long term. But this was homes of executives and the inner circle there at FTX. Any of that surprise you? Have you ever seen something so egregious and so outrageous?
Well, listen, I've been around Madoff. I've been around WorldCom. I've been around Adelphia. They bought sports teams with the monies that were taken. So I've seen it all. But that, to me, doesn't bother me as much because you can get that money back. You can sell those houses and have the money available to the investors, the creditors. What really concerns me is that's a small fraction of the billions that look like it went out the door and it'll be more difficult to recover. So although I smiled when I saw it, hopefully you can get that money back. It's the stuff you can't get back that really concerns me.
Hey, look, at least they didn't spend it on hockey teams. Judge John Dorsey said he wants to ensure FTX individual creditors are protected from cyber threats. When will we know who the creditors are, and does it even matter?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's going to take probably a couple of weeks for them to figure out the exact universe of creditors. The reason why it matters is because bankruptcy at this stage is pretty simple. You take your assets and you divide it into your liabilities, and that's how you can figure out what the distributions are going to be. So if you have $500 million in unrestricted assets, as you stated earlier, and you have $8 billion in liabilities, which is the number that Bankman-Fried gave, then it looks like investors are going to see less than 10 cents on the dollar. If that number is lower, then they would get more. But that's why that's important, because that determines what the distribution to the creditors are going to be. And so they're on a dual track. One is to monetize the assets as quickly as possible, and the other is to determine who the creditor body is.